This is a countdown of the 50 most influential people in Anderson's 150-year history, as determined by the Herald Bulletin and a panel of local history experts. This is our list. The top 50 most influential people in Anderson's history. And now, numbers 20 through 11. Number 20. Gospel music superstar, Sandi Patty.
Sandi Patty, I heard sing as a college student. Even my ear said this lady is top stuff. And Sandi's used her Christian faith and music to actually be a great witness. And Anderson has become known all over the world because of Sandi Patty.
She came to Anderson College and hooked up as a backup singer with Bill Gaither. She went from there into her own career, which blossomed when one of the networks picked up her version of the Star Spangled Banner during the nation's bicentennial. She became one of the popular gospel singers nationally.
She's just a lovely person, and I think she's another person that was a God-given talent that has shared it with so many and kind of put Anderson University on the map because of her talent. And whenever she's performing, she always speaks of Anderson and Anderson University, and I admire Sandi for that.
Number 19. Businessman and community leader, Will Carter.
Will Carter was an energetic black gentleman, grew up on the west side. His family was in the electric business, but he became a very strong advocate for Anderson. Did some radio work, and Will was a great citizen of Anderson, Indiana.
I met Will Carter when I was in high school. Will Carter used to have a radio show where he would ask students to appear on there and just talk about what's going on in the schools and what's happening in the community. Will Carter had a very distinctive radio voice. He really was a fascinating man that went from radio to owning one of the largest businesses in the city of Anderson, and did a lot of business not just nationally but internationally. He had the Will Carter Express, which he started a fleet of semi-trucks, and they traveled across the country, and I believe his name still is listed on, or still on the trucks as you see them on the highways, Carter Express.
Number 18. Auto industry leaders and philanthropists, Jim and Marilyn Alt.
Well, the Alts, you can't have one without the other, Marilyn and Jim. And they are a great team, and they do so many community events. They're always, I never heard them say no.
They're people who've given much to Anderson. They're a good Christian family. They've stepped up to the hospitals. They've stepped up on many fundraisers in Anderson, and they're people who have, they know many people to go to, and they have some clout there. If they, when they're doing things, then I think if you say the name of Alt, that's one name that they respect.
Number 17. Anderson Herald publisher and women's rights advocate, Harriet Tonner.
Harriet Tonner was publisher of the Anderson Herald in the 1920s, during a time when women held few positions of power and really had few opportunities in business. But as the leader of the local newspaper during the golden age of print, she made a profound mark on Anderson. Not only was she a respected and forward-thinking business leader, but she was also a leader of the women's rights movement here in Anderson. She formed the Anderson Women's Council and was active in local, state, and national politics in the aftermath of women getting the right to vote in 1920. She had an interesting background too. Tonner was born in Clarks Hill, Indiana, but spent her formative years in Nebraska with her family. She returned to Indiana and was trained and worked for a short time, beginning at the young age of 15 as a teacher. She then moved to Anderson to take the job as women's editor of the Herald. They had such positions back in those days. And later married Herald publisher Edward Tonner. After she succeeded him as publisher, she really had a profound influence on Anderson and on the local women's movement.
Number 16. Indiana Court of Appeals Judge, Rudy Pyle III.
Mr. Rudy Pyle is an African-American judge. I met him a couple times. Very classy man, very educated man, great example for the young people who might want to go into law. and maybe later on become a judge. He's an appellate court judge right now. I believe he was born and raised here in Anderson. I'm not sure, but I think he was. He's a classic example of what you can do if you put your mind to it and you have an uplifted spirit about yourself and self-respect for yourself. Yes, 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 definitely. An influence on the community. And there's a lot of people that don't know Mr. Pyle, but they should.
And now, a word from our sponsor. When we come back, numbers 15 through 11. The Top 50 Most Influential People in Anderson's History video series is sponsored by Luce Funeral Homes and Crematory. Family owned for 3 generations since 1979, Luce Funeral Homes and Crematory is everything you need in one location. Luce Funeral Homes and Crematory is located at 200 West 53rd Street in Anderson. Visit lucecares.com for more information. We're counting down the top 50 most influential people in Anderson's history. Here are numbers 15 through 11. Number 15. Business and arts leaders and philanthropists, Bill and Ann Hardacre.
Well, I think God tells us if you're given, then if you're given much, you must give much. And I think we lived by that. Bill ran for mayor and was defeated, and we felt it was a blessing, or I did anyway, because we did things that we wanted to do that he could not have done if he would have been in a leadership as a mayor. In fact, the Paramount Theater was one of the things that we helped. We had a girl come to us and say, well, Bill, what are you doing now? And she had, well, it was Leslie Davison, and she had heard that the Paramount was going to be torn down within the month, which it would have been. And she said, would you be interested in helping save it? And Bill said, well, if it's just to save an old building, no. But if there is a reason, we will delve into it.
Bill and Ann Hardacre are my neighbors. Of course, in Anderson, everybody's your neighbor. And they, again, epitomized community service. Bill was a strong businessman, had a lot of properties, owned a lot of properties, developed a lot of properties. Ann was known by every child, mostly girls, for her dance studio. And she still does, believe it or not, have a hand in that. But the Hardacres, and that name, when you say that, you think of the dairy, which was a huge part of Anderson's economy in those days. And they developed that, plus they were early supporters of Anderson University.
Number 14. The only Andersonian to serve as governor, Winfield Durbin.
Winfield Durbin holds the distinction of being the only governor of Indiana from Anderson. He was elected governor in 1901. He had been a Civil War veteran, and then later on he was a veteran of the Spanish-American War. Very, very popular person, active in politics, knew all of the presidents of the United States that during his lifetime had personal contact with him. Extended invitations to Benjamin Harrison, to William McKinley, to Theodore Roosevelt, and to Howard Taft to come to Anderson and speak, and they came because of their friendship with Winfield Durbin. One of the most influential people in Anderson's history because of his connections in the area of politics.
Number 13. Auto industry and education leader, Tom Snyder.
Tom Snyder, there's a go-getter, Tom Snyder. He came up through General Motors, was exec with General Motors, and that's what he is identified mostly with. But when he retired from his industry work, he became president of Ivy Tech, which is Indiana's biggest college. And as president, he's really made Ivy Tech a name well known, and is growing very fast, providing lots of education for people who maybe missed it in the conventional sense. So Tom Snyder, you give him a job, he can get it done.
He and Bill were very good friends and did a lot of things together. And they were in some partnerships together. And I still meet with him both as a friend and as a partner in some of them. And I admire he and Bobette both. I think they've stepped forward in Anderson and done a lot of things. And I think with this new Ivy Tech building coming, that we're going to see a growth in Anderson, and people coming into Anderson that maybe didn't think about Anderson before, but by being out on the highway, it's going to have good exposure. I think he's been a wonderful leader for Ivy Tech.
Mr. Tom Schneider was one of those who believed in allowing people to, especially people on the lower end, or I would say on the lower end of the scale, allow them to grow and become a significant part of whatever endeavor that he was involved in.
Number 12, nurse and tuberculosis patient advocate, Ella Kerr.
Ella Baggett Kerr arrives in Anderson in 1907, and she has a passion for helping people, improving the health of people, and she works tirelessly in that effort. But in 1918, when the soldiers were returning from Europe after World War I, with them came the dreaded tuberculosis. And so she opened up a center on the 3rd floor of St. John's Hospital to care for patients suffering from tuberculosis. She'd had in her own family 3 family members die from tuberculosis. So she had a vested interest in trying to help people that had tuberculosis. She went to the county health officer in the 1920s and said, I need a place in Madison County where people can go and be healed, or at least obtain rest from the tuberculosis. And so the health department gave her the pest house, which was out on East 10th Street at White River. People today may remember it as Tanglewood Girl Scout Camp, but it was the pest house, and that unfortunately was a place where people who had communicable diseases in those times were sent to get them away from the general public so that they would not spread whatever it is they had. So Ella worked at that hospital from, it opened in 1924, was opened in 1947. It's estimated by, and this is a low estimate, it's estimated that through her efforts some 3,000 people were saved. Lives were saved because they were able to go out to the hospital that was opened up there and enjoy rest and fresh air, which were the 2 things that they knew were critical in the treatment of tuberculosis. And so if there's anybody in Anderson that influenced the health care, had more to do with health care and compassion than any other person, it's got to be Ella B. Kerr.
Number 11, pioneer automaker, John Lambert.
John Lambert is best known for automobile production in Anderson. The Lambert family, comes from Ohio to Anderson, and they establish a business down on Sycamore Street called the Lambert Gasoline and Engine Company. There they prosper in the old Ward Stilson building that later became Ward Stilson. In 1904, though, he makes his greatest stride when they relocate to Columbus Avenue and they build the Buckeye Manufacturing Company on Columbus Avenue. And there he manufactures tractors, farm equipment, fire engines, but he's most noted for the Lambert automobile, which in its day was one of the finest automobiles. And it had a different kind of transmission with it that made his car unique. He was in business until 1917 on Columbus Avenue when World War I broke out and the business converted to war production. And when the war was over, World War I was over, he, I think, looked north to Detroit and saw GM, Chrysler, and Ford on the horizon and decided not to get back in the business. He's unique in Anderson because he's the only person in Anderson that has 2 historical markers. We have the historical marker on Columbus Avenue marking the site of the Buckeye Manufacturing Company, but then also his home at 7th and Hendrick Street has a historical marker in front of it. So John Lambert was a very, very influential person in the city of Anderson from, say, late 1890s to around 1917.
That's it for numbers 20 through 11 of the top 50 most influential people in Anderson's history. Visit heraldbulletin.com to see the rest of our list.